Hello everyone and welcome to the first video in the series for the rebuild of this Gardner 6LXB. Now those of you who follow the channel will know we've just completed one of these that was for a Atkinson Borderer truck. This one's going to be slightly different because this is originally from a Smith's crane and it's going to be rebuilt and modified to replace a Meadows petrol engine in a Scammell Explorer. Now we're just going to give the engine a quick check over as to whether it's feasible for us to try and start it, or whether we shall just start tearing the engine down and see what we find inside. There's a few things straight off the bat that we can see that will cause us problems for trying to run it. The Amel lift pump here is damaged. There's a bit broken off here, so there's no fuel inlet. Not the end of the world because we can gravity feed it for test run, but that will need repairing. The fan on the engine is very badly bent and hits on the compressor, so we'll need to remove, I mean they're already half removed, but need to take the belts off to make sure that that doesn't try and turn if we run it. And the other thing that we've noticed is something's wrong inside the cam box because the throttle does not work at all. It is lock solid. So we'll have a look over the rest of the engine and see if it's possible to get it running. So before we start crawling over the rest of the engine for whether it's runnable or not, this engine's 1976 built, but unlike the last one where it was all numbers matching, this is very close, but it's not numbers matching. So this one here says 202554, which makes it a 1976 engine. Down here it says 202552, so it's only two engine numbers apart, but they do not match. So something's changed in its lifetime there, so I don't know whether it's had a injector pump off of another engine which just happened to be so close in engine number, or whether it might have actually been mixed up in the factory when it was new. The other thing is you'll remember, if those of you who watched the last LXB video, that the engine number was stamped on the flywheel. Well, we've had a look at the flywheel on this one, and although there are some numbers stamped on it, you can just about make out TDC here. They are virtually worn off on the flywheel all the way round, so we can't find an engine number on it at the moment. So anyway, let's move on to seeing what else is not right with the engine and whether we can get it to run. It appears that a few of the tappets and the rack might be stuck, so some of these are okay, but some of them feel like they're stuck up. So what we'll do is we'll get this cover off in the middle, and because this throttle isn't doing very much, we'll get these covers off and take a look inside and see what the problem is. There's a lot of leaves and muck down the back of the cam box, so before we take this cover off, we'll have to clean all of that out, otherwise it'll end up inside the cam box. With all the bolts removed and all the crap down the back hoovered out, we can pull the cover back out the way a bit. We'll need to remove this one to get it out completely, but that's the view inside. It's all quite well seized up by the looks of it, so we'll get the covers right off and have a proper look, but I think that might be the end of trying to get it to start, because we won't waste time trying to get all of this freed up. We'll just get the cam box off and recondition the cam box as part of the rebuild. Right. We've got all the covers off, and the cause of all of this not moving as it should is the rack in the pump tops is seized solid. Now, it clearly been outside for a while somewhere because there was quite a lot of corrosion and water ingress inside the link between the two pump tops. And there is no movement there at all. So as we're trying to strip this engine for overhaul, we're not going to waste a load of time trying to get this all freed up. That'll happen when we do the cam box for overhaul. So we'll move on to starting to get the engine stripped down. So I think we'll start by opening up the top and taking a look inside under the rocker covers. Right, let's take a look inside. Ugh. Quite a lot of carbon build up in there, quite clearly been sat for a while as well. Doesn't smell very nice, luckily you can't smell it over video.
That might be you though.
Okie dokie, well we'll open up the other one then. There we go, that one's nearly as bad. You can also see there's quite clearly been a bit of moisture in there. Not terrible, but certainly quite dirty. Right, okay, so we'll move on. We'll get the manifolds off. Again, quite a bit of corrosion inside the manifold. There's obviously been a bit of moisture in there over the years. Ah, interesting. So, this engine has got the wrong exhaust manifold on it. First thing that's going to need replacing on this engine during rebuild is the exhaust manifold, because although it is a downward facing manifold that will be needed for the Scammell it's going in, this manifold's actually off of an LW, not off of an LXB. The distance between the flange face here and this area here, which is where the exhaust clamps rest, like this, is different. On the inlet manifold it's much deeper, so you end up with a gap here. Now, in process of taking these nuts off and these clamps off, someone had actually put nuts in here to use as a spacer, so this manifold will need swapping out for the correct one for this engine. Okay, so with the manifolds out the way, next up on the list is to get the top water rails and all the water manifold pipework off this side of the engine. So there you go, that's the bypass pipe removed. Pretty clean inside, not blocked. So slightly different to the last LXB, this here, which wasn't on the other engine, is a water feed to the brake compressor. We've just opened up the thermostat housing, and unlike the last LXB, which was full of gunge and blocked up solid, this one isn't blocked up. It's got a bit of corrosion in it, but it was missing its thermostat. So next thing on the list of things this needs is a replacement thermostat. Now, it would have been getting one anyway, but it's actually missing. We've just removed the top water rail, and between the cylinder heads and the rails there were no gaskets fitted. You can also see this hole here is partially blocked, and this one here is completely blocked. That one's a bit scaly, but yeah, so the water jacket on this would probably have leaked between the cylinder head and the top manifold, and this port here wouldn't have been doing a lot at all because it is blocked. So with the water rail and thermostat housing out the way, I've just opened up the fuel filter. The fuel filter unit has been full of water. There's a sort of watery mix in the bottom of there. This is all a horrible mess inside. We've just opened up the water pump. It's in very good nick inside. I think it's not long had a replacement water pump at some point, because the impeller is the later type. It's also got the modern seal unit in it. No corrosion to speak of, so we'll get this off. And then the last thing on this side of the engine for ancillary components to come off is the starter motor. Having just said what I said about it looking quite good in that side, it clearly, same can't be said for the condition of the bearings. The bearings are utterly ruined in this pump. This side of the engine's all now stripped. Starter motor is off. One thing we have found, however, though, is that it appears that the cylinder block is cracked. Hopefully you can just about see here. It certainly looks like there's a crack there. Now, we will pressure test the block, but I would hedge my bets that that is cracked and won't hold fluid. So during the rebuild of this engine, it will need a replacement cylinder block. With the other side now fully stripped, we're going to move on. So we are going to get rid of all the ancillary components on this side of the engine so we can get the cylinder heads and the block off. So with all the cylinder head side plates off and the injector clamps out, before we carry on with trying to get the cylinder heads off, we'll get the oil filter assembly and all the pipework and the cam box out the way. Just leave that there to drain for a few minutes. So there's quite a few nuts missing from holding this filter unit on, so either they vibrated loose and come off, or someone didn't put it back on properly the last time it was removed. So with the oil filter assembly out the way, next job is we'll take this fuel line off before making a start on removing the cam box itself. We need to slacken the drain, which is under here from the Gardner, and take this pipe off and disconnect the main drive, and we should be able to take the cam box off. So that's everything securing the cam box to the engine undone, so we can hopefully pull that off now. There we go. So I quickly hoover up the mess. Alternator can stay where it is for the time being, so next job we'll get the timing case opened up. So there we go, end cover off. Very loose timing chain. The end bearing on the camshaft is not terrible, but not brilliant either. But all in all, not too bad for an engine this old. So with the cam box out the way, we now have nothing stopping us starting to strip the heads and the block off. So we'll start by getting all the rocker arms and rocker shafts out, remove the injectors, and then get the heads off. This is quite clearly not had the valve clearances adjusted in a very long time, because some of these aren't too bad, but a few of them have got massive valve clearances. Okay, so we're going to have to leave this dosed with some penetrating oil. and then come back to it later because it's grown onto the studs around this corner. After a lot of struggling, we now have both cylinder heads off. There's been a bit of moisture inside, so cylinder 2 and cylinder 4 both quite corroded. There doesn't appear to be any pitting in the cylinder bores and it's not seized, but they've clearly had moisture in them. The engine all turns fine. There's no, it's not seized at all. The cylinder heads on are also got a few issues. You can see here, this is the head from cylinder 1, 2 and 3, and you can see where there's been moisture in the cylinder. You'll also see on cylinder 3 on this one, this valve here, I'll have to figure out why, we haven't looked yet, but isn't actually sat on its seat. It's held off of its seat slightly, so the valve could be stuck on carbon or it's slightly bent or something like that. So we'll take a look at that when we strip the cylinder heads down. Now this here is the other cylinder head. So you can see cylinder 4 has had corrosion in it. This valve's quite bad. It's quite scabby and disgusting. But anyway, both heads are now both off. The cylinder bores themselves, it's a shame the block is cracked, because actually it's in pretty good condition. There is a little bit of wear on the cylinders, but if this was an engine that you were just putting into service, I think if we get the bore mic out, the bores would actually be within tolerance. So anyway, obviously we'll be having to replace the block on this engine because it's cracked, and even if we weren't replacing the block, it would be getting new liners because it's being obviously reconditioned back to as new. So we'll move on now and get the cylinder block undone from the crankcase and lift that off before taking the pistons off. We now have the cylinder block off. So next job is to get the pistons off the top of the con rods. Now these pistons, a bit like the last LXB, have quite a bit of play in the upper ring groove. They're not as bad as the ones in the last 6 LXB, but still got quite a bit of play nonetheless. These are also 14:1 compression ratio pistons, so these won't be going back into the engine. It will be getting new 15:1 compression ratio ones. So that's all the pistons off the engine. Bit of scoring on the gudgeon pins, but no noticeable edge to the wear area, so they don't look horrendously worn. Now, being able to see down inside now. Not too bad, a little bit dirty. But certainly not heavily carboned up. We can have seen a lot worse than that. Anyway, that's all we've got time for in this video. So join us again soon when we'll get the rest of this stripped down and see what the crank looks like. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching and see you next time.